Okay. Okay, so that means that Lindsay has opened up. Oh, look, there are already people coming in. Well, right on. All right, I'm going to go ahead real quick, Jen, and go to my script. And that'll take me just a second here, but I'm going to wait for folks to trickle in a little bit. Oh, good. Ian Hamp is here. Hi, Ian. So yeah. Hey, everybody, welcome. I have a feeling we're probably not going to be quite as busy as we have been just because it is a holiday weekend. Oh, look, Jennifer's here too. How great. I haven't had a chance to check your text, Jennifer, so I'm glad that you're here too. All right, I'm going to just go ahead and start with my script. Real quick, let me see. There we go. And I also want to, oh, good. Mary's here too. That was the one I was really worried about. Okay. So, hi everybody, and thank you so much for joining us at Secular AZ today. For those of us joining, please feel free to put your name in the chat in the webinar. As you all know, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy, and Secular AZ is your voice for the separation of religion and government. We are a nonprofit organization, and we act as your voice to elected officials all across the state and at every level. So be sure to check out all of our social media channels and like, subscribe, and share. Also, are you a secular activist lady or man in the Tucson area? Well, here is a shout out to our Secular AZ community in Tucson. Because if you enjoy watching this speaker series live on Zoom Friday at noon, then you're probably going to love watching it in Tucson in a gathering with a bunch of people in person, like-minded secular folks. They're going to be launching a weekly Tucson get-together starting June 7th from noon to 1 to watch this live speaker series presented every Friday. They've got a TV. It's going to be great. It's a beautiful home. It's a casual open house format, so come as you are. Come early or drop in late, and no need to RSVP. It's located at a home converted to a community meeting place in the San Clemente neighborhood near Broadway and Alvernon. Oh, that is a nice neighborhood. Secular AZ members and their guests are welcome, and you can get the address by emailing one of our board members, Mary, at secularaz.org. So that's Mary at secularaz.org. There will be soft drinks, coffee, and tea provided. Feel free to bring your own lunch or snacks, and we hope to see you at this weekly in-person Secular AZ Southern event. That will be happening not next week, but the following week. Now, next week, join us on May 31st when we're going to be joined. And this is so timely, folks. I can't even believe we got lucky enough to get him. But we're going to be joined by local reporter Jared McDonald Avoy, who will be discussing his reporting on the Council for National Policy, a secretive Christian policy group that pushes Christian nationalism and extremist right-wing ideology into mainstream politics in Arizona and around the country. So click here. Well, let's see. Sorry, I didn't mean to read that part. If you don't know, McDonald Evoy reports for the Arizona Mirror. Previously, he worked for the Arizona Republic, where he spent 4 years covering everything from dark money in politics to Catholic priests' sexual abuse scandals. He brings strong watchdog sensibilities and creative storytelling skills to the Arizona Mirror. So you won't want to miss that. But today, okay, we are speaking with, in my opinion, a true Arizona champion. Jen Marson is the executive director of Arizona Association of Counties. After the constant election lies and conspiracy theories pushed by extremists on the right since 2020, elections in Arizona feel more fraught than ever. So we're going to learn about this role, about the role of poll workers. Hopefully she'll tell you how you might be able to become a poll worker or point you in the direction where you can find out how to do so. So I'm so excited that you're here today, Jen. And just to give everybody some background, I follow what's going on at the Capitol, and I watch these committee hearings, and Jen Marson is really somebody who just acts with the utmost professionalism. She brings facts and receipts to every single committee hearing. And sometimes, even despite hearing all the facts, our leadership in the House and Senate just kind of disregard what Jen says, although she's a pro and she knows what she's talking about. So welcome, Jen. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, and we're trying really hard. We are nonpartisan. We don't get involved in elections or anything like that as far as supporting candidates or endorsements. But we do care about the issues. And so we want to be able to inform folks. So we're going to have folks coming from like League of Women Voters to talk about the ballot initiatives, and Vic Aronow to talk about the judge retention and all that kind of stuff. So, but you have such a unique position that, first off, I think it'd be really important to just kind of tell the folks who are watching this a little bit about your position and what it entails.
Sure. So the Arizona Association of Counties, much like you described your organization, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan association that's been around since the early 1960s. And we were created to be an education/advocacy organization on behalf of Arizona's county government. So a lot of people think that I work for a county, like I'm paid by the county, but I am not. I am the executive director of a private nonprofit. And all of Arizona's counties are members of our association. So again, oftentimes people think I only represent Maricopa County, and that's not true either. We represent everybody. And predominantly, we work with all of the elected positions at the county level. So for purposes of today, that would include my work with the county recorders and the election directors. The election directors are not elected. It's a weird gray area in our structure, but nonetheless, we represent recorders and election directors for purposes of today. But we also do sheriffs, assessors, county school superintendents, superior court clerks, constables, justices of the peace, treasurers, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a broad swath of topics that we cover. I have been with the association since 2002. I started as the intern, and I became the director in 2013. And so that means since about 2004, I have touched almost every piece of election legislation that's been passed in Arizona. Whether ACO initiated it or we helped amend it and draft it. So I've been really a big part of Arizona legislature in terms of elections for a long time now. It's one of my favorite subject areas because it's something about which everyone cares. Right? Sometimes if you're talking about tax policy, you lose a lot of people, right? But everybody cares about elections. So it's really a fun area for me. And as you mentioned, it really has exploded in terms of profile since 2020, right? And I used to talk about working in elections. People would be like, yeah, whatever, pre-2020, actually pre-2016. 2016 is when it started for us to get just really sort of big spotlight, right? And so we draft a lot of legislation. We were integral in the bill earlier this session to move the primary because of the electoral college conundrum in which we found ourselves. So I'm happy to answer questions. I was asked to come and talk about poll workers, which I'm absolutely going to do, but I am kind of a general knowledge expert when it comes to elections. So if people have questions that aren't specific to poll workers, please go ahead and ask them. I'm happy to answer if I can. Just so everyone knows, our board is made up of elected officials from all over the state in all of those different positions. And it is our board that chooses if the association takes a position on something. It's not the staff that picks, and it's certainly not just the officials within the subject area of the bill. So for example, on an election issue, if the election directors and recorders have communicated to us that they don't like something, as staff, we take that position to our full board of directors, and our full board of directors makes the decision whether ACO supports, opposes, or is neutral, or just stays out of any particular bill. So there is a very robust process about how we come to our positions. It's never just staff making that recommendation.
And did I hear you right? So that your board is made up of elected officials?
Correct. So we have a 30-member board. 5 of them are officers elected by the full membership. We have 1 representative from every county. So there's geographic representation. So for example, the Maricopa County representative is Steve Watson, who's the school superintendent in Maricopa County. But then we also have 1 representative from each elected office, so that there's office specific representation. So, we have a recorder representative, an assessor representative, a treasurer representative, et cetera, et cetera.
And so just at the county level, you don't get elected representation on your board from, say, like a state legislator, a state senator, school board member, city councilor.
That's correct. They're all county elected officials.
Okay, right. I did not see, I'm already learning stuff. I knew that was going to happen. So
Mhm.
speaking of poll workers, and since that's the reason why we're talking today, what exactly is the role of Arizona Association of Counties when it comes to poll workers? Like, do you share a role with the counties? Yeah.
No, we don't. Other than the fact that all of our legislative staff, we are certified election officers through the Secretary of State's office, and we have all served as poll workers, but we do not recruit poll workers. We don't, I mean, I'm happy to recruit poll workers. I'll send people to any county. You know, every county needs poll workers. There's no county that's full maxed out. So if any, no matter where your participants on the meeting are today, if they live in Arizona, I can point them in the right direction about where they would go to be a poll worker.
Okay, well, let's start, sorry to every other county out there, but let's start with Maricopa since it is the largest. So if somebody lives in Maricopa County, how would they work to become a poll worker? What's the process?
So actually the answer is the same for every county. You're going to contact the county elections department. Don't contact the recorder, contact the county elections department. Just Google, you can Google all of them. They're all Googleable. Cochise County Elections Department, Mojave County Elections Department. And they should have a main phone number. If they don't have a link that specifically takes you to poll worker information, they'll have a main number. Just call that number and they'll put you in touch with the poll worker recruitment person. It's that simple. I will say that poll workers are an integral part of successful elections anywhere in this country. Volunteers have been part of the election process since the United States of America started having elections a long time ago, and we couldn't do it without volunteer poll workers. So I say volunteer because people volunteer their time, but it is technically a paid position. It's not a lot of money. And it varies between counties, but you're probably looking about $100, maybe $150 for the day. So it's not technically volunteer, but we know that it's a long day, and we appreciate the people who are willing to do that.
And how long is the training process for somebody to become a poll worker, and what does that training process entail?
Yeah, that's a great question. So statute actually requires counties to train all of its poll workers. There are exceptions, and we can get into that if you'd like, but training takes about 4 hours. And there's multiple different training days that are available in any given county. Some of our counties also have online training, so you could just log into a portal and do some training that way if you couldn't make it to an in-person training event. We are asked to have everyone trained 45 days before any election. Obviously, there are people who come in after that date, and there are mechanisms that counties have to get those people up to speed. Because like I said, we're always lacking in poll workers. And so if you come late to the game, we're going to find a way to train you and get you in there because we need bodies. So yeah, the training will go over a lot of things, and there's a big manual that comes with it. So you're not expected to remember everything, but you are expected to know where in that manual to find the answer to the thing you end up having a question about, right? Everything from what can I wear if I'm a poll worker in this political environment? How do I set up all of the equipment associated with getting the polls up and running? How do I interact with voters? What does a ballot style look like? What does that mean? What would my specific job be? And then, of course, the most stressful part for any poll worker is the end of the night, the closing procedures. Because at the beginning of the day, you're sitting in a room with hopefully a bunch of friendly people waiting for voters to come in, but nobody has cast a ballot yet. And that is a really easy place to sit. But at the end of the night, you're sitting in a room that's full of hundreds, maybe thousands of ballots that people have cast, and that's precious cargo. So people always get a little nervous at the end of the night, making sure they're doing everything correctly, following all of the steps, because those are people's votes in their hands.
Yeah. Wow. There's a comment here that I want to address. Angie says, I was a poll worker in Illinois before I moved here 11 years ago. Unfortunately, when I tried to be a poll worker here, they wanted to send me to Tucson. Long day and long hours wouldn't work. And I don't know if she did that 11 years ago, if Angie, tried, but maybe it might be worth it to try again, because I've heard a lot on NPR about like, there's a shortage, like we need all hands on deck, that, we need those folks to show up.
Yeah, there's definitely a shortage, but I will say this. So Tucson is in Pima County, right? Our second biggest county. So let's say someone from the southern part of Pima County wants to be a poll worker, but the southern part of Pima County had a lot of people step up from that area, and they are full in that area. That elections department is going to try and put you somewhere else in the county where they're lacking. And it sounds like from that example, maybe she lives in a place that isn't close to where they needed to put her. And that's unfortunate. And sometimes that happens. We try to put people, every county tries to put people geographically close to their home base, because at the end of a very long day, the last thing you want to do is have to drive an hour or two or more to get home, right? Nobody wants to do that. In terms of the long hours, it's a long day, y'all, no doubt about it. You have to be there at 5:30 in the morning. Polls open at 6. They close at 7, but anyone who's in line at 7 gets to vote, which means if you are at a place with a line, you can't even start your closing procedures until after that last person has voted. And then you have to go through all those procedures. And there's a couple people that are responsible for making a delivery of certain items from that polling location at the end of the night. So you're looking at 12, 14, 16, 17 hours. It's a very long day.
So there's another, yeah, there's a little bit of this in here, and I wonder how we might, if we could maybe change this, but for some people, they might have a health issue or something. They can't be awake that long or on their feet that long. So, why are the shifts so long? Why don't they split them up? Or is it just, yeah, why?
Well, that's a great question. I think the biggest part of the answer is that's what we've always done, right? It's habit. That's how it's always been done. But also, especially in this environment of hypervigilance, whenever we take workers out of an active polling site and replace them with new people, because we have had emergencies, someone falls and breaks something or gets violently ill and we have to swap them out. There is always nervousness that it's being done for a duplicitous reason. And that's not the case, but that narrative is so hard to roll back in this day and age. Oh my, the county swapped people out because I was asking too many questions and so they made me leave, right? That's the narrative that we try to avoid. And so sort of tangential to that, there's been discussions in recent years about allowing counties to pick up the early ballots that have been dropped off during the day on election day, so we could start the verification process on them sooner. And we've all sort of decided that is tough. Can you imagine the optics of going into a polling place and taking a bunch of ballots out in the middle of the day? The same optics exist for swapping people out.
Which is now question, because has it always been that way, or has it been like that for the last 4 years?
It's been that way since 2016. The PPE of 2016 is what started all of this conspiracy kerfuffle, if you ask me.
Of course, of course,
yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get back to the questions here. And this is, I know probably a lot of people are showing up today to ask this question, because it's something that comes up a lot. And we even had an issue this year with a church as a polling place. So the question comes from Mars from Earth. How do we establish polling? Like, how do counties establish what the polling locations are? First of all, that's the first part of the question.
That's a great question. So a lot of times we have to rely on the kindness of private business. That's just a fact. When I first became a voter long ago, it was a lot of schools and a lot of churches. Those were the facilities that stepped up and said, yeah, we're willing to be a polling place. And there were two predominant reasons for that. Those facilities, by and large, are ADA compliant. They have enough parking. Right? And so those are two things that are incredibly important when we're trying to find polling places. However, over the years, many of those places have actually started to say no for a variety of different reasons. From a school perspective, when you are a polling place, that means that any random person can show up at your campus that day to be a voter. And from a child safety perspective, a lot of schools don't like that. It makes them nervous. And so they've started to say no. And from a church perspective, we used to have a lot of churches, and I should tell people, I've been a poll worker and I've been a troubleshooter, which is sort of a super mega poll worker, if you will, right? And so a lot of churches had been polling places, but when there is what the church feels is a controversial issue on the ballot, they don't want the signage associated with that controversial issue on their property. And so they opt out of being polling places. And that it definitely has left a void because, you know, like in Maricopa County, for example, back in, let's say, 2008, there were almost 1,200 polling places in the county. Maricopa cannot find 1,200 places now, which is why they use a vote center model.
Okay. Yeah, that's not surprising. So I think that kind of answers Mar's question. How can we add places that are not churches? I think it sounds like you need to just take what you can get at this point.
Yeah, we did have some legislation in the recount bill, the bill that moved to the primary, that is going to require government buildings to be polling places, which is nice. But especially if we're talking about rural Arizona, it's not like there's a government building every 4 blocks either, right? You have to be almost in the county seat or the big city of that county to find those government buildings. And so it's helpful, but it's not super helpful. There have been conversations about requiring schools to be polling places since they're publicly funded. I think we will see some legislation next year on this, and it will require high schools. That way we don't have daycares on campus and we don't have little kids on campus. And so I think we will see that in the future, but it's not in place for 2024.
Okay. Jude is a poll worker and she says that the manual is comprehensive and very well organized. There is a bit of a consensus here that we need shorter shifts, but considering that everybody is a QAnon conspiracy theorist these days, I mean, makes it a little bit more difficult, I would say. There was another question up in the Q&A, and this is a great question too, kind of going along with the whole, people who maybe have some kind of disability. James says, I have impaired sight. Would that rule me out as a poll worker in Maricopa County?
I bet you that the recruiting team in Maricopa could work that out. I bet you they could, because while our statutes are very prescriptive about what the roles of poll workers are, they're also interchangeable. And the person who serves as the inspector is kind of like the project coordinator for the day. And they can move people around and, okay, your job is supposed to be this, but I need you to do this instead. And people will rotate throughout the day so that people aren't getting bored with doing the same thing all day long. I bet there is a way to figure that out. I really do.
Okay. So probably, go do the Google search, find out more about becoming a poll worker. If it is, and you said specifically Maricopa County. So, does that mean that because they're so large, maybe they have the ability to do that, or
No, I would think that any county, I would think that they could find a way for that. Depending on what the person's visual limitations might be. I know, like, for example, the marshal, if the marshal was stationary, the marshal sort of announces the times that the polls are open or closed. They monitor if people are being unruly. They check the line to see how long it is. So all of those things could be done by someone who doesn't have perfect vision, right? The handing out of ballots might be tricky, because especially in a primary where we have multiple ballot styles available at any given location, we would want to make sure that the site isn't impairing the reading to a point where there would be confusion about what ballot a person should get.
Mhm.
We also have a person that if in the counties that do on-site tabulation, there's a person that stands by the tabulator to make sure that the voter is inserting their ballot correctly and what to do if it doesn't take it on the first try. I would think that could also be accomplished by someone who doesn't see exactly perfectly. I have glasses, I don't see exactly perfectly.
Mhm. Okay, well, I would say to James, maybe just do that Google search and see what you can find out.
Mhm.
Going back to the church thing, I mean, we had a problem. There was somebody outside of the 75 feet, you know, but it was at an LDS church, and you know, the church basically told the person that was gathering signatures that they couldn't, even though they totally could, and so that was a thing that happened. We got somebody else here, and Jennifer in Pinal says that there's been a big problem with LDS churches in Pinal County. Mary says, I thought churches were exempt from ADA compliance. I can't answer that, Mary. Oh, I didn't realize this. Jennifer says the issue is that they want bishops to ensure that no one goes into the restricted areas, but that violates state law. You must know more about state law than me. So is that the case?
Say it again.
Jennifer says the issue that they want bishops to is that they want bishops to ensure that no one goes into the restricted areas, but that violates state law.
I don't see any reason why any poll worker or voter would need to go into a restricted area of a church. So I wouldn't think that that would be a problem, but
Yeah, well,
if you're saying that it is, then.
let's see if there's an answer here at the bottom of the chat. Give me one second. ADA compliance isn't upheld in parts of AZ. Okay, that's true. All right, so let's go on to what we have next. Let's see. There's so many. I knew people were going to be interested in this topic.
Sure.
Here's a question. Oh, here we go. This was one of the things that I was going to ask. So Jude says, any comments on HCR 2056 to eliminate early mail-in ballots? So let's talk about this bill that is making, did it make its way through both the House and the Senate? Is this going to the voters?
Not yet,
Okay.
not yet.
Okay, so go ahead and talk a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an HCR that was heard in the Senate, a special Senate Elections Committee last week, I think Wednesday or Thursday. And we had sort of thought that these issues were put to bed for the session because the committee deadline was a long time ago. And they've given themselves special permission to hear this new bill. And as introduced, we are opposed. We spoke in opposition to the bill, and it does a couple of different things. It eliminates dropping off an early ballot without ID on Friday at 7, the Friday prior to the election day at 7. It shrinks the kinds of locations that can be open over the weekend, and it requires all counties to tabulate on site, which means at all of the voting locations on Tuesday, on election day, every county would have to have a tabulator, not only for people who are voting, what we call a standard voter, going to the polls and voting that day, but also a tabulator for people who are dropping off their early ballots. And in that case, those early ballot people would be standing in line, showing ID, and then running their mail ballot through a tabulator right there at the location. If you have watched me testify over the last couple of years, tabulation on site is a go to the mattresses issue for the new Godfather fans who are on. That is an issue we are willing to die on our sword on that issue. We cannot do it. It is problematic. It blurs the audit trail. It blurs responsibilities between the recorders and the elections directors. It's incredibly confusing to staff, meaning you all volunteer poll workers who would be managing that system day of. We hate it with the passion of 1,000 fiery suns, right? It's real bad. Now, so that's what was contemplated in committee last week. And then over the weekend, everything changed because Mr. Bennett, who is a senator from Yavapai County, doesn't like some of those provisions, and he is the no vote that would prevent it from getting out of the Senate at this point. I will tell you that some of the conversations now are new things, right? Maybe the tabulation on site comes out, we're happy about that, but maybe they make changes to AVIL, which is our, used to be called PVIL, the permanent early voter list. Now it's the active early voting list, right? Changes to AVIL, keeping the change about early ballots on Friday. Maybe there's a requirement that says a certain number of ballots or percentage of ballots have to be counted by X date post-election. So the new version was supposed to be voted on in the Senate 2 days ago on Wednesday. And we were told all weekend and on Monday and most of Tuesday, Jen, it's going to go Wednesday. That's the edict. It's happening Wednesday. It's happening. It's happening. And then I got a call Tuesday afternoon and they said, nope, it's not happening. We don't have the ducks in a row. We don't have the votes. We're not in agreement with the House. It's not happening. And then I'm sure you all know, Wednesday was totally dominated by the border immigration HCR, right? And through a weird quirk of not paying attention, right? So we all know, I think, that the House is adjourned until June 4th. And anytime one of the chambers adjourns for a really long time, they have to get permission from the other chamber to do so. So the Senate, when they were done with their work on Wednesday, they couldn't adjourn for a really long time because the House is not in session to grant permission for them to do that. So the Senate is technically at recess until the sound of the gavel. The challenge or the gray area with that is they could come back at any moment. There is no, we need to give you 24 hours notice in order to come back. Now, I think they still will because their members are out. It's Memorial Day weekend. Who knows how long they're going to be gone, blah, blah, blah. And they've only been meeting on Wednesdays anyways. But technically they could come in on Tuesday morning and try and vote this out, right? So we just have to keep our ear to the ground and figure out. Now, it still has to go through the House if it does in fact pass the Senate. And then if it passed both, then it would go to the ballot.
And I mean, I think it's pretty clear this legislative session that some things may be, I feel like most things will be passed out of the House, but the Senate, it is Bennett's Senate, right? And he usually is the one lone dissenter. So yeah, and for, I say this on a regular basis that like we should require every person in Arizona to watch even just a half an hour of any given committee hearing in Senate Jude, elections, or government. There's either, it doesn't matter if Hoffman or Kern or Kavanaugh are there, just go watch it. Watch a Senate. I wish everybody would watch even just 30 minutes of that 4-hour floor session on Wednesday. So you can see the things that these people say, because I think that if people did that, they would really, it would be a very eye-opening experience for most everyday Arizonans.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go back to the questions coming from the audience. Mary does in fact she was right. Mary says, I've Googled it, I'm right. Religious orgs and private clubs are exempt from ADA, and entities controlled by religious organizations are exempt. Now, that being said, I would imagine that there probably are some churches out there that are compliant with ADA, but as Angie says, ADA compliance isn't upheld in parts of AZ. I would imagine the more rural spaces, it's not,
Yeah.
This is a great question too. Oh, and they're two people, great minds. It's Lee and Sharon, but they both think that these private schools that are now getting my tax dollars for EASA voucher money should be required to be polling places. Absolutely, but guess what? They don't have to be ADA compliant, and they'll have some reason to oppose it, I'm sure. So let's see, messages are flooding in here. This is the one that I wanted to get back to. Mars, with all the good questions, says, how much does it cost for all the polling for an election, let's say a local election, and who pays for it?
When you say polling, do you mean opinion polls or poll workers?
I think she's talking, they're talking about poll, like, the maybe day of, or setting up the vote centers, maybe. Mars, if you want to clarify in the chat, feel free to.
So while they're going to clarify, I will say that's a hard number for me to just give you, because you have to keep in mind that the people who bring the equipment to the locations are generally salaried county employees, right? That's part of their job. So there's no additional costs associated with them doing that. There are some places who are locations for free. They just want to be helpful in the community and they don't charge us anything. There are some that we have to pay to be polling places, and sometimes it's $100 and sometimes it's $1,500. it varies election to election. If you had a location that had some challenges, or they didn't like people on their lawn, so to speak, right? And they're willing to be a polling place again the next election, but it's going to cost us a little bit more, right? So it's not even a static cost election to election, especially when you have a jurisdictional election in March, very few locations, a massive general election in November, a lot more places. And so it's impossible to tell you how much that costs. Counties budget for elections about 3 years out, right? Each county will sort of try and put a high dollar number on it so that we have enough money when the election actually rolls around to be able to pay for all the things that we have to pay for. But there isn't one number that is going to be true, not only election to election, certainly county to county,
Oh,
and
yeah.
definitely not even year to year. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let me just check and make sure that I have the questions here. And I recall that so there was, because there are now so many of these ballot referrals that are coming directly from our legislature. I don't remember how many there are at last count. I want to say maybe there's like 6 that have actually gone, or maybe 4 that have actually gone through all the way. I can't remember, but I have heard that because now the voter guides also have to accommodate for those ballot referrals that are going directly to the voter. And I've heard some estimates that it's going to turn our ballots into like 2 or 3 pages. Do you have any idea if that's going to be the case?
Yeah, so we call them cards, a 2-card ballot. So before all of the potential referrals, Maricopa and Pinal were already at a 2-card ballot. And that's 2 pieces of paper. That's not necessarily all 4 sides, right? But it's 2 pieces of paper. If we have, like we did in the mid-2000s, that was an 18 ballot proposition year, those counties will almost certainly go to 3 cards. And you will have other counties that have never been 2 cards before being 2 cards. And that's max length, front and back, 2, maybe 3 pieces of paper. That is a disaster. The only county who has ever been 2 cards before is Maricopa. This is going to be Pinal's first time. So we do know what happens when there are 2 cards associated with a ballot. Sometimes we only get 1 back. Sometimes when people mail their ballots back, let's say you live in a household with more than 1 voter, 1 envelope will have 2 first pages, but no second pages, right? And it is a logistic audit trail nightmare to try and reconcile all of that. Your undervotes are totally skewed when we only get 1 page back, right? Is it really indicative that people ignored those things? No, it's indicative that they didn't send us the second page, right? It's much more expensive because obviously there's more pieces of paper associated, and when you're talking about mail ballots, it's more weight in the mail for the county to pay to send that out and to have it come back. So the costs are exponential, the confusion is exponential, and it will take longer to tabulate and reconcile, especially with the judges who always cause problems.
In more ways than one, right? Let's see. Mars is not quite satisfied. They just want to know. Let's see. If you could give an example of just one like county budget, maybe even Maricopa County, like the most recent one, or if you could give just a ballpark of maybe what the expectation is in a normal year where we don't have an insane number of referrals and stuff.
I'm trying to think if I can remember the per ballot cost from the last general. I don't want to throw out a number and be totally wrong. That's my issue.
Yeah, no, understood. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't think I would be comfortable because I would totally be, because that would only be the mail cost anyway. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Mars. I just can't do it.
Well, thank you for trying though. And I understand not wanting to put out inaccurate information for sure. Oh, good. Look, here's Jen. And Jen, you'll want to switch from host to panelist to everyone so they can see what you're writing. Pinal's last budget was 1.2 million. So hopefully that helps Mars, because Mars was asking hundreds of thousands. And I mean, if Pinal which is much smaller than Maricopa, is 1.2 million, then I would imagine that Maricopa County was much larger than that.
So the only thing
yeah.
I would say to that is that's probably a full-fledged election for Pinal. I would be surprised if 1.2 was just the poll workers / location cost. That would be surprising to me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yes, the whole election. That's what Jennifer
You know what?
said.
Here, let me do it this way. The PPE, which is not nearly as big as the general, right?
Mhm.
Cost counties about $9 million. That's all counties in the state.
Whoa.
And that's a really small election. So if you want to try and extrapolate that, that's probably the closest I could get right off the top of my head because we just did the PPE.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Let's see. One question that I have is about the difference between vote centers and polling places. I guess my first question is, I believe, was it County Recorder Fontes when he was still in the role of opening the voting centers? How did we come about, or how did those come about? And what are your feelings about vote centers versus polling places? So go ahead with the first question. Could you give us a little backstory about those vote centers, how they came about?
Yeah, so Yavapai County, which is one of our most red counties politically, is the county that first instituted vote centers back in, gosh, I want to say 2011. And that was largely born out of the fact that they didn't have enough locations to be precinct based. All voting in the nation used to be precinct based, right? You would go to your neighborhood church, your neighborhood school, your neighborhood fire station. And over the years, those places just stopped. And so we had to find other ways. And Yavapai was at a point where they just didn't have enough. So they had to consolidate precincts into larger locations, and they called it a vote center. And ACO actually ran legislation, I think in 2012, to codify that practice so that statewide everybody would be on the same page about how to use them. And that's how vote centers were born. So when we talk about, like Representative Rachel Jones had an HCR to ban vote centers, and we were adamantly opposed to that. And from her perspective, she believes that it should be precinct based. I don't think anyone disagrees with her, but I said to her, what will happen when not enough places say yes? We can't compel private business to be a polling location. So you will hamstring counties if you say you have to be precinct based, and then there literally aren't enough places who are willing to step up. Then what do we do? Right? And so that's the problem.
Yeah, it's crazy to me too, because we know that typically our most conservative folks, the ones who are most likely to be election deniers, are those folks who are in more rural spaces. So it's infuriating to me to see these people literally they're going against the best interests of their constituents and even undermining their own elections by limiting the vote of the people in their very red counties. It just make sense, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I guess if you need to go along with the narrative that an election was stolen, then you're willing to, I guess, disenfranchise your own voters or something. But it doesn't make any sense to me. So the next part of my question was, it sounds to me like you have pretty positive feelings about vote centers. I mean, are they something that you'd like to see stick around and maybe we need more of, considering that folks are having a harder time getting people to commit to being polling places?
So from a county perspective, we definitely want vote centers to stick around. And the reason is because they're not mandated. It's what works best for that locality, right? So we have some counties that are still precinct based because that's what their voters want, and they have enough places and they can do that, and that's how they like it. Great. We have some counties that are only vote center. Maricopa, Yavapai, et cetera, right? We have some counties, I call them the 3Gs, Hillegram and Greenlee, that are often hybrids. They have precincts in some areas of their county and they have vote centers in other areas. And sometimes they even overlap depending on the population and where people are spread out and where people work in those rural places. So we like having as many options as possible to serve the electorate of any given county.
Right on. Okay. Yes, noted, Kate. Kate said, please don't call election deniers conservatives. They're radicals. You're right. And she also asks, is it safe to be a poll worker?
I would say yes. I have been a poll worker and a troubleshooter in easy peasy elections and very contentious elections. And while there are certainly places where tensions have gotten high, that ire was directed at elected officials who were not there. And generally speaking, poll workers are well respected, and I mean, there's exceptions, but I would say yes, it's safe.
That's good to hear. So Kate's follow-up here is, will there be more training? From what I heard, it's as long as it's 45 days before the election date, correct? As long as you're fully trained before then.
So that's the statutory requirement. But again, if someone comes to us 30 days before the election, we will find a way to get you trained before the election, because again, we're trying not to turn people away. So if you're able and willing to work, we're going to find a way to get you trained.
Excellent. Yeah, we had a secular event, and then we decided we went to see a documentary, and then we had some dinner afterwards, and the gentleman that was sitting next to me said that, you know, he wanted to volunteer. He's retired, and he's like, I'm gonna try poll work, you know, and he loves it. So he's been doing it now for a while, and he highly recommends it. He did say it was pretty grueling work. Oh, look, we've got a representative with us today. Representative Contreras is here, and she says, I've done poll watching as a volunteer and have always been impressed with the poll workers' professionalism and poise. Agreed. They're always so pleasant, I feel like, and really helpful. Every once in a while, I'll see people that I know who are poll workers, so that's always kind of fun too. But I always feel like they're very pleasant. You know, I'm sure there are exceptions, but my experience has only ever been positive.
Yeah. And did you know that you can be 16 years old and be a poll worker?
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, I love, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we
We
need
love it
to,
when the students volunteer because they don't have any angst about technology. When you're setting up the site books or the ballot on demand printers or the accessibility devices for that community to be able to vote, they're like, yeah, cables, cords, I got it, no problem. We love it. So you have to be 16, you have to have your parent or guardian's permission, but yeah, we'll take you.
I love that. And I know a few teenagers in my universe who might be interested in doing that. I think that's fantastic. And what a great, like, early kind of, you know, introduction to
Mhm.
like democracy at its most basic, you know, integral form. That's fantastic.
That's right. And for those of you who are in the education space in any way, it doesn't count against a school's ADM if that student is working at a poll that day. So the school isn't docked for not having that child on campus.
Oh my gosh, that is, I love, that's like the best thing I've heard all week, I think. I just love that. I really do. My background's in education. I taught middle school and high school for many years. So yeah. And I, you know, every once in a while I'd have a couple of budding activists in my midst. Let's see if I think I saw, oh, Jude says, training now also includes conflict de-escalation techniques. So to further answer the question about it being safe, you may have to employ some of those techniques for sure. Let's see if I
One of
missed.
the things, honestly, one of the things that is one of the most important things to remember as a poll worker is, according to the Help America Vote Act, everybody gets to vote. So if someone comes in and they're not registered, we still give them a ballot. It's ultimately not going to count because it's a provisional ballot and we're not going to count it, but we will provide everyone a ballot who wants one. So when tensions start to escalate, well, I know this is my precinct and this is where I want to vote and I am not leaving and you're going to give me that ballot. Yes, ma'am, I am. Here you go. Right? That should be the poll worker's default. Absolutely, we will give you a ballot.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean it's going to count.
yeah. There is one comment from an anonymous attendee. Back in the day, schools were used. That is problematic now. I personally don't see it as problematic. You know, I mean, I guess I do worry because, you know, we are probably more divided than we have been since the Civil War. And in fact, some amongst us might even consider us in a slow Civil War. But I can get how some people would be a little bit leery of it because kids, but somebody in the chat also said, you know, wouldn't it be great if it was, you know, if kids got off school that day, you know, it wouldn't be that hard to fix it. You know, maybe you take away, another holiday, you know, maybe you exchange President's Day for voting day. I mean, I'm sure all of the dead presidents would want us to vote, so they probably wouldn't mind not getting a day off for that, right?
Yeah, ACO has long advocated for an in-service day on election day. So that, yeah, if your teachers are on campus having some sort of training or whatever, but there's no students. The challenge is, and I think I just saw someone mention it, the challenge is a lot of the schools still have their like before and after school or daycare programs on days when there are in service, and then you still have students on campus. So that's the hurdle that we're trying to get over right now.
I do like the idea of moving it to a high school setting, you know, just to kind of maybe avoid any kind of nefarious behavior or whatever. Um, Perhaps I'm also like kind of in tune with how much nefarious behavior there is among some people. It's probably not as bad as I'm making it out to be. Yeah, a weekend even. I don't remember what I was listening to something on NPR. I don't remember what country it was that was having an election, but it's on a Saturday. Like, hello, let's just have them on Saturdays. And yeah, I know that they're like service workers and, you know, restaurant workers and things like that who work on Saturdays, but I think that, you know, it would be a much easier kind of way to do it. Yeah, and a free stipend for childcare. That sounds like a great idea. But yeah, I don't know if Bootstraps America is quite ready for all of that, because that sounds like the other SCR that Senator Kern was trying to push through. I think it was SCR 1015, the anti-Marxist bill. So watch out. It sounds like you're trying to do something good for a whole bunch of people, so we don't want that, right? And I'm not seeing any other questions here. So, and it's kind of perfect timing. It's 12:51 and we're about to get ready for a 3-day weekend here. So, what would you like folks to take away today about the work that you do, and maybe how they can support the work that you do or get involved with the work that you do?
You know, I would say that, and I was just asked this question almost exactly about 2 weeks ago. So, you know, when any county has an open meeting to talk and their board is getting together to talk about something, these days, folks that believe the election was stolen or that there's fraud or we're getting ballots from Korea or whatever, they show up in droves to talk about almost any issue on the agenda, and they try and relate it to elections. And in Maricopa County, about 3 weeks ago, there was a meeting, and someone from the side of things that I represent got up and said, I actually think you guys are doing a really nice job, and I appreciate the way that this county runs elections. And the way that that really bolstered the spirits of the people who work for the county, who were either watching the hearing or who were in the room. It really took some people's breaths away, because they have not had public commenters be nice for years. And so if you're so inclined, I would suggest going to an open meeting that your board of supervisors or any other county department is having. And if there's vitriol, don't be vitriolic back, but be nice and talk about the things that you believe are correct. And if you feel that they're doing good work, say that.
That's a great, I love that advice. It's the same thing because we monitor a lot of what's going on in our school boards. I mean, obviously we're focused on separation of church and state, and you know, these Christian nationalists are getting onto their school boards and disrupting, and in some cases trying to completely defund and bankrupt the school district. So you've got all these people, like a long line of people who can only find problems in the world. And so, you know, we tell our members, show up, and just say thanks. Thanks to the folks who support public education. Thanks to the folks who are serving right now. Thank you to the teachers, whatever. So same kind of thing. And somebody did ask, how do we find the meeting schedules? And I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, Jen, because what I've heard is that they don't, like, it's not consistent when they are. Is that still true? I know that was how it was in 2020. I remember a Board of Supervisors candidate saying how the meetings aren't consistent from week to week. Is that still the case?
They can have special meetings almost at any time, and that is a challenge, but they do have to publicly notify. So if you just bookmark the Board of Supervisors agenda page, and you can check at any time and a meeting will post. Now, some meetings are executive session only, and you're not going to be able to be in there, and that's just the way that that goes sometimes. But legally, they're supposed to post a notice for any meeting that's upcoming on any county's Board of Supervisors page. So if they're not doing that, that's the kind of thing you might want to follow up with me and let me know, because I can try to ring that bell to make sure that that's happening.
Right on. And let's see, I had a question that I saw here. Let's see. Where did I see it? Patty Contreras is very excited about the 16-year-old poll worker news. Excellent. Answered the question about meeting schedules. Lots of praise. So much praise, Jen. This has been really, really informative. And David says, please bring Jen back soon. Well, if you want to catch her, I'll tell you what, on any given day during a regular legislative session, you can probably catch her at one of the committee hearings, being very calm, cool, and collected while she tries to talk sense to radical extremists. So one last thing, because this is how we end every single, because sometimes these are like doom and gloom meetings, you know, like we talk a lot about like the rise of Christian nationalism. So this has been, I think, all in all, really informative and positive. So in these times where we are so divided, where you are facing this HCR 2056, what gives you hope, Jen?
I inherently personally believe that humans are good, and I'm a big support. So when I was in school, my education was a very philosophy based, and I believe that we change the world one person at a time, and that starts amongst our close friends and family. It's not necessarily about being in front of a large crowd and giving a rousing speech, which those are great and those give me chills and I love those moments, but it really is about making sure that the quiet messaging is happening amongst the people that you care about the most, because then it will spread, you know, like clover amongst everyone. And so that's just my personal philosophy.
Well, I think a lot of people on this call probably agree with you. I definitely, you know, I have to believe that the goodness that resides in all of us will get us through whatever is being hurled at us. So, well, with that, see, that was positive. I hope everybody has a wonderful 3-day weekend. I will be uncontactable. I'm going to be going on the Upper Salt River on a kayak trip, so don't try to call me. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Bye. Thanks so much, Jen.